Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I am your host, Josh Peck. We have a very special episode today, and for the next few weeks, we're going to be doing an entire series on the Essenes in prophecy. The Essenes, Dead Sea Scrolls, their calendar, what it tells us prophetically, even how the Qumran community came to be, how the Pharisees and Sadducees came to be, how Rome came to be in charge over Israel during the times of Christ and the apostles. We got so much to talk about, and we couldn't do it in just one episode. So for the next 5 episodes, we're going to be talking about all this. Now, typically, I don't like series. Typically, I don't like doing part 1, part 2, part 3, because I know if you're like me, every time I look on YouTube and see like part 3 of something, I'm probably not going to watch it because I feel like I have to watch the other parts. So this is going to be a very loose series. You're going to be able to understand every part in this series, even if you haven't seen the other episodes. Now, I highly encourage you do see the other episodes, and we're going to make all of that available to you at dailyrenegade.com. So go to dailyrenegade.com. We're actually offering a free 7-day trial right now. And what is Daily Renegade? Daily Renegade is full episodes of everything that we provide. So we actually have 5 different shows right now. We have JPD Weekly, which is what you're watching right now. We have the Sharpening Report, which is a show that I host and I interview interesting guests on most topics of Christianity and things like that. But we also have the Christian Contrarian with Gary Wayne. He is the author of the phenomenal book Genesis 6 Conspiracy, if you're familiar with that. We also have the Christian Marauder with Brian Melvin, who is absolutely fantastic. He does a lot of Bible study stuff as well. And then we have Detox Babylon with Michael Stibbs. So we have 5 different shows, and we're probably going to have more coming. So what we do on YouTube is we provide you with a free kind of preview. We usually give the first half of the episodes for free and then ask you guys to go to dailyrenegade.com to get the rest. And the reason that we do that is because YouTube has consistently deleted our content. We used to be able to just offer all of this for free, but and just host everything on YouTube, but we can no longer do that because YouTube has deleted a bunch of our content. Actually, an entire channel, 8 years worth of work that is gone because it wasn't backed up. So we have learned our lesson, and we created Daily Renegade. So we're doing a free 7-day trial right now. You can head on over there. You can sign up. You can try it for a week, see if you like it. And I have no doubt that you will like it. And after your trial is up, you can make the decision if you want to continue on. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. If you can do it, I suggest $100 a year because it's actually cheaper. You get 2 months for free that way. And then you don't have to think about it for a whole other year. So it's a good deal. So all of that to say, and we also have a ton of other stuff at Daily Renegade too. We have some articles. We have a podcast version of all of our episodes. If you're an audio only kind of person, you can get full access to all of that. We have a ton of other things. You can even follow other members online if you create an account with us. So we're trying to kind of build like a little mini social media site right in there. We want Daily Renegade to be your one-stop shop for everything that church won't talk about. So most of the things we talk about at Daily Renegade, you're not going to hear on church. Also, just real quick before we get into our study, we also have available right when you go to dailyrenegade.com, there is a free episode of the Sharpening Report that talks about the coming prophetic financial collapse and how we as Christians can protect ourselves against it. There's a lot of ministries that are involved in like gold and silver companies, and for years and years and years, I have stayed out of that because, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, a lot of those companies, I think that they're just out there to make money, and I'm sure a lot of you have gotten the same feeling as me. So for the longest time, I stayed out of that kind of stuff. However, I have actually found a company that isn't just about making money. They actually want to provide a ministry service to Christians. Michael Stibbs, the host of Detox Babylon, is involved in this. He works for this company. It's called Cornerstone, and you can roll over some of your investments in silver, and it really does help because it stays protected, and as our financial system keeps collapsing, silver will remain the same. So technically it remains the same. It'll be like in 5 years you technically have like more money, but not exactly. It's that our financial system keeps going down, but the silver stays the same, so it appears as if it's more. It'll be worth more in the economy of 5 to 10 years from now. Now, this isn't a get rich quick kind of thing. You're not going to make like a ton of money off of this, but what it is your investments will be protected. You're not going to lose money. So that's the whole idea. It's something that we as Christians can have access to. This is first and foremost a Christian company, and it's something that we as Christians can have access to, that we don't have to participate in this beast system with global banking and all that stuff. We can say goodbye to the current financial system that really all of us hate. We all have issues with it, and we can do our own thing as Christians. So we have that available to you. You don't have to be a member to take part in that. You can just go to dailyrenegade.com and immediately right on that first screen, on the login screen, you'll see the free episodes. So you can get all the information there totally for free. And then you get all the information on how to sign up, or if you want to ask Cornerstone for more information, they can walk you through the process. It's a great company. I really believe in them. And after you watch the episode, I believe that you will too. Okay, so all that being said, those are the announcements for what's going on at Daily Renegade and what to expect in the future. Let's jump right into the study. I am so excited about this. I have been almost borderline obsessed with Dead Sea Scrolls, with the scenes, with the Zadokites or Sons of Zadok or the Qumran community, whatever we want to call them. I have been so fascinated with this topic because it really helps fill in a lot of the blanks that we have in Christianity. This all has to do with our roots as Christians, like where we came from. And, kind of just generally speaking, we know, well, we come from the Jews. We come from the Jewish religion, and their Messiah came, and those who accepted it became Christians, and thus we have Christianity today. And that is that is true, but that is a very watered down version. What actually happened? There's some things that aren't known, and there's some things that are known within academia and modern scholarship, but it doesn't typically trickle down to the church. So that's what I'm trying to do. I want to bring this stuff to the church because it is so exciting, and I really think it'll help enrich your I don't want to say your faith, because your relationship with Jesus is the thing that should enrich that. But you do get to learn some more about God. You do get to learn some more about our descendants, our spiritual descendants, how Christianity first started. And amazingly, the Qumran community, the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were actually known to have extremely accurate prophecy, and those prophecies were recorded. And there's a lot of things that we've never heard of before. So we're going to get into all that in this series. Now, before we can really appreciate the content and history of the scrolls, we have to know at least the basics of how they came to be discovered in our modern day and what their role was in ancient history. There are already entire books and videos in existence about the discovery of the scrolls themselves. So I'm only going to provide like a brief review here because I don't want to rehash things that have already been talked about a million times, and I'm sure you guys don't want that either. So we're going to go through a brief review of just how this discovery happened. And then after that, we'll look at the world in which the scrolls were created and that missing 400 years between the Old and New Testament. What really happened there? Because you look at the Old Testament and we understand that pretty well, but then when you get to the New Testament, everything's different. Israel is being ruled by Rome, and there's Pharisees, there's Sadducees, and how did all of this happen? Well, we're going to talk about all that. So let's start with the discovery of the scrolls themselves. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in Qumran, which is an area in Israel. It's located on the northwest corner of the Dead Sea, hence the name, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it was these things were discovered between 1947 and 1956. They were originally discovered by a Bedouin shepherd who was throwing rocks into caves. Some say that he was searching for treasure with his friends. Some say he was just doing it, out of boredom. But whatever the case was, he was throwing rocks into caves and heard some pottery break. So upon investigation, clay vessels filled with ancient scrolls were discovered in the caves. There were between 900 and 1,000 parchments that were discovered, and they all contained sacred writings in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Now, generally speaking, with very few exceptions, these scrolls were discovered to have been written about 100 or 200 years before the birth of Christ. I think there was only one or two that were written in the AD years, and we're not going to really get into those. So all the scrolls that we're going to be talking about throughout this series, any that we mention, these were all written 100 or 200 years before Christ, and that's incredibly important to keep in mind and to remember that, because there's going to be some things when you read through the scrolls. Especially when we get into like a scroll that's called 11Q Melchizedek. I mean, it describes perfectly who the Messiah is, what he's coming to do, and this was written like 100 years before Christ, so we have to remember that. This verified dating of the origin of the scrolls is incredibly important because of the detailed prophecy having to do with the first and the second coming of Messiah. That's right, they actually have prophecy relating to our day, relating to our future, which is just phenomenal, and I can't wait to get into that stuff. Now, Dr. Rachel Elior, she's a professor of Jewish philosophy at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She's done extensive modern-day work on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and according to her, Dr. Elior, these scrolls should be divided into the following categories. So 5 different categories here. You have the biblical library, which is the books of the Old Testament. So they had all the books of the Old Testament except Esther, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But there's that category. There's para-biblical writings. So these would have been apocryphal texts such as Enoch and Jubilees. There's the mystical library, which is like the sabbatical Psalms, would be an example of that. A polemic library, which would be like the War Scroll. If you've ever heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, you've probably heard of the War Scroll. It's one of the most famous scrolls that they have. That and the Copper Scroll. But now the Copper Scroll wouldn't be part of the polemic library. That would be like the War Scroll would be a good example of that. And then there's the sectarian literature that talks about their group, their sect. So an example of that would be the Damascus document. Now, in her lecture, she has a lecture online that's really informative. It's called Who Wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls and Why They Were Forgotten. Dr. Elior explains how all of the books of the Old Testament, except the book of Esther, were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this exclusion of the book of Esther might provide a clue as to the original purpose of the Qumran scroll collection. So Dr. Elior suggests that the reason that the book of Esther was not included in the Qumran library might have been, because nobody really knows. It actually could have even been an accident. They might have had Esther, and we just didn't find any copies of it because they either were taken when they were taken with them when they left, or they were deteriorated, and we just haven't found them. So there's several things that could explain that, but Dr. Elior suggests that Esther was not included, possibly because it doesn't contain the name of God in it. So all other biblical books have at least some reference to the divine authority of God, but the book of Esther does not. So if the Dead Sea Scrolls were intended to be a library of sacred writings, then a book that does not reference God would not be considered sacred by the parameters of that library. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the Qumran community thought less of the book of Esther or thought that it wasn't inspired text or anything like that. Only that they may not have believed it to belong alongside other scrolls in that particular Qumran library if the purpose of that library was to hold sacred texts. So, if that's true, and we don't know if it is, but if that's true, that would mean that the Qumran community who kept this library thought of each scroll as containing sacred texts. And there's a lot of texts in there that aren't included in our Bible, like Enoch, Jubilees, 11Q Melchizedek, Messianic Apocalypse. There's a lot of scrolls like that that aren't included in our Bible, nor should they be. And that's something that we got to keep in mind too. Nobody is saying that these books should have been, well, there are people that say that, but they're wrong. These books should not have been included in our text. What we have in our Bible is what's supposed to be in the Bible. There wasn't some nefarious conspiracy where books were removed maliciously or anything like that. If you actually look into the history of how we got our Bible, maybe we'll do an episode on that at some point on here on JPD Weekly. But if if you actually look into the history of that, there wasn't any weird conspiracy thing. It was all appropriately done, and it was all understood. So even ancient Jews, they understood that the books of the Old Testament that we have, that was canon. Now they had a lot of other texts, but there's reasons that those other texts weren't included in the canon. And even later on with the New Testament writings, there's a lot of reason, there's good reason why other books weren't included in the canon. Not all of them were preserved. For example, there's even, like what we find in Qumran are fragments of Jubilees and Enoch. But the current version that we have of like the full text of Jubilees, the dates are all screwed up. The dates are all messed up. They give that our current translation, which was translated from other languages into the Ethiopic Ge'ez and then into English. Well, that translation somehow messed up a lot of the dates. So when it says, so and so happened on this date or in this Jubilee, in the book of Jubilees, those texts are messed up. Now we know that the original was not like that. We know the original was different because of the fragments of text that we have from Jubilees. We can compare it and we can actually see that there's a difference in those dates. But we don't have enough of the original Jubilees to actually piece together a full manuscript. So it wasn't preserved. Now that doesn't mean that we can't read Jubilees. We can read Jubilees and we can get a lot out of it, but we should never elevate that to the same level of Scripture, if that makes sense. Same with Enoch. The Enoch that we have today, things could have been added or removed, and we only have fragments of Enoch from the Qumran community, Dead Sea Scrolls. So things like that, there's good reason why. For some reason, God chose not to preserve these texts and to have them included in the canon. Now, there are sections that are very helpful, like the book of Enoch. I do believe that there are things in there that are meant for our generation, but not to be included in the canon. Because again, if you were to include everything in the canon, I mean, you'd have a book that's like way too thick to no one would read it. The Bible's already pretty thick, and it's already hard enough to get people to read it. If the Bible was 2, 3, 4, 5 times the size of what it is now, and that was the canon, who would read it? It would be even harder to get anybody to take the time to do it. So there are good reasons why these things weren't included in the canon, and we should not expect them to be. We should, in my opinion, we should not want them to be included in the canon, but we can read them for some historical context. And the cool thing about the Dead Sea Scrolls is they don't contradict anything in the Bible. They fill in some blanks, but they don't actually change anything. Now, all that being said, from our perspective today, like I said a moment ago, we understand the Old Testament pretty well. It begins with the writings of Moses and it continues on until the book of Malachi. Now, throughout the Old Testament, the Jewish people are waiting for the Messiah to come, a promised individual who would be anointed by God. After Malachi, there is a 400-year gap until the beginning of the New Testament. Now, when we read the book of Matthew, the first book in the New Testament, we discover the conditions in Israel are extremely different than they were when we left off from the book of Malachi. So Israel is being ruled by Rome. There are religious leaders called Pharisees and Sadducees. There isn't much explanation in the Gospels themselves on how everything in Israel changed. So this is where we can look to some other texts written within that 400-year gap, including some of the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, to help explain the transition between Malachi and Matthew. So this leads us to the silent 400 years and the sons of Zadok. Now, while this 400-year gap between the testaments is typically called the silent years, it turns out that there's actually a really rich history available to us of this time period if we know where to look. So until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the best things that we had available to explain this time period was Jewish history contained in the Talmud. And just to make a quick, brief note on the Talmud, because there's a lot of hatred of this book, like a lot of more than any other book. Look, it's a religious and a historical text. All right, so just like you could look at like the Indian Vedas are kind of like that, and are the are the Indian Vedas, are they anti-Christian? Of course, because they teach a different gospel. They teach a different thing. Is the Talmud anti-Christian? Of course, because of the same reason. It teaches a different gospel. It doesn't teach or preach Jesus Christ. So, of course, there's problems getting any kind of spiritual enlightenment from the Talmud or from the Vedas or from anything like that. But there is history contained in the Talmud that can be very beneficial. Now, of course, it always helps if you're going to take history and separate that from the spiritual teachings. If you're just going to take the history, it always helps to have other sources to help confirm what the Talmud is telling about Jewish history. And just like any other text, it can't just be trusted blindly. I mean, you can do that with the Bible, but even that, you have to be careful. Are you trusting the Bible, or are you trusting your own interpretations? And you can't just trust your own human interpretations blindly. So there is kind of this irrational fear and hatred of the Talmud. There's a lot of, and we will do a whole episode on this. There's a lot of claims going around online about the Talmud that it says certain things about Jesus, and it's just, long story short, there's no reason to believe that those are true. You could interpret things in a certain way, just like you can do with any text, but there's no real reason to fully believe that was the intended interpretation of those scripts when they were first written. Now, again, there's a whole thing on that we will have to get into in a different episode. I don't want to go on too much of a rabbit trail here, but I just wanted to address that, yes, there is an irrational, just vitriolic hatred and even fear of the Talmud itself, but it's really just like any other, pseudo-spiritual historical text out there. No, it does not teach anything good about Jesus, of course, so we don't use it for spiritual enlightenment. And again, a lot of the blasphemous stuff that people claim is in the Talmud, they don't have a real reason to interpret it that way. But again, we'll have to get into that in a different episode. But just suffice to say, we can look for some history in there, but it always helps, and we should do this with any historical text, even Josephus. We should do this with any historical text. It always helps to have confirmation from other sources. So if we can do that, that helps. Like, for example, Josephus, he's an amazing he's amazing at history, but historian, that's what I was looking for. But the problem is, I believe he was going by some Greek translations that had the dates messed up. So even in the works of Josephus, when he gives like ages or dates, or they're not correct. Some of them are kind of messed up. So we always have to look at that stuff, but we don't have to just say that under no circumstances at all, no matter what, should you ever look at the Talmud, no matter what. I think that is going a little far, and it's kind of ridiculous. You can look at it. It is a historical text. It is a text that was written historically, and you have to take it in the context that it was meant to be understood. And, of course, it is not a Christian text, not whatsoever. There's nothing Christian in it, but it does contain some Jewish history. So up until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the best things that we had available to explain this time period, this silent 400 years, was Jewish history contained in the Talmud, the 4 books of the Maccabees, and works of ancient historians such as Flavius Josephus. Now, all of these sources leave some things out, and it can be difficult to piece together every point of history within these 400 years. And even all of these sources kind of have their own slant, because that's just human nature. So, for example, some have said that because Josephus was a Pharisee, that he's a little kinder to the Pharisees than he should have been in some areas. So he may have had a slant, maybe not. Maybe those claims are completely unfounded. But of course, the Talmud's going to have a slant. All of these historical documents are going to have some kind of slant. Christian historians have that as well. There are ancient church father texts that might have a slant. So you got to take each piece on its own and look at it for what it is and make your own determination. But we just have to realize that is human nature. It's always been like that. It always will be like that until Christ returns, until this world is set straight. But I mean, we even have that in the mainstream media today. So we should expect that we're going to find that in historical texts as well. So this is all that we've had to really piece together those 400 years until the Dead Sea Scrolls, because they have helped quite a bit since their discovery and publication. So it all begins with a command of God to Aaron, recorded in the Torah, that priests of Israel were only to come through Aaron's family from the tribe of Levi. So we get this from Exodus 28:43 through 29:1a. From the New King James Version, it says, they shall be on Aaron and on his sons when they come into the tabernacle of meeting, or when they come near the altar to minister in the holy place, that they do not incur iniquity and die. It shall be a statute forever to him and his descendants after him. And this is what you shall do to them to hallow them for ministering to me as priests. And we have another one. We have another reference to this too that says, quote, then the Lord said to Aaron, you and your sons and your father's house with you shall bear the iniquity related to the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you shall bear the iniquity associated with your priesthood. Also bring with you your brethren of the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may be joined with you and serve you while you and your sons are with you before the tabernacle of witness. They shall attend to your needs and all the needs of the tabernacle, but they shall not come near the articles of the sanctuary and the altar, lest they die, they and you also. They shall be joined with you and attend to the needs of the tabernacle of meeting for all the work of the tabernacle, but an outsider shall not come near you, and you shall attend to the duties of the sanctuary and the duties of the altar, that there may be no more wrath on the children of Israel. Behold, I myself have taken your brethren, the Levites, from among the children of Israel. They are a gift to you, given by the Lord, to do the work of the tabernacle of meeting. Therefore, you and your sons with you shall attend to your priesthood for everything at the altar and behind the veil, and you shall serve. I give your priesthood to you as a gift for service, but the outsider who comes near shall be put to death. And that is from Numbers 18, 1 through 7. And again, we were reading from the New King James Version. All right, so Levi was one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Levi was the father of Kohath, who was the father of Amram, who was the father of Aaron and Moses. So this is how the line of Levi connects down to Aaron and Moses throughout time. Now, instead of just any Levite being a priest, God narrowed it down to Aaron's descendants. And that can be a bit confusing, as we actually have two individuals named Zadok in the priestly line. So throughout the Old Testament, we see this priestly line narrow down to the first Zadok, who is the 12th from Aaron, and then to a second Zadok, who was high priest during the construction of the first temple during the days of David and Solomon. Now, according to the book of Ezra, the first Zadok mentioned was the 12th from Aaron. And the family line from Aaron to the first Zadok is as follows. So we have Aaron, Eleazar, Phinehas, Abishua, Buki, Uzi, Zerahiah, Merioth, Azariah, Amariah, Ahitub, and Zadok. In the book of First Chronicles, we see the family line from Ahimaaz, son of the first Zadok, to the second Zadok, and we see that that is as follows. So we already looked at the first 12. So now after that first Zadok, we have Ahimaaz, Azariah, Yohanan, Azariah, Amariah, Ahitub, and Zadok. So, that can get kind of confusing because a lot of those names are repeated. A lot of the names are the same, but these are different individuals. So that second Zadok is the individual referred to when the term sons of Zadok comes up throughout the rest of this book. Now, King David set up Zadok and Ahimelech, I don't know exactly how to say that, Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, as priests. So King David set up Zadok and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, as priests. Now, later in the days of Solomon, we learn in the Bible that there was some rebellion. So Adoniah was attempting to secure the throne, and Abiathar sided with him. Now, through inspiration of the Holy Spirit, Solomon expelled Abiathar from Jerusalem and gave the priesthood over to Zadok. And then after that, and from that time forward, high priests were to come through the line of Zadok. So after the second Zadok, his family line, which is sometimes called the Zadokite dynasty or sons of Zadok, Zadokites, that family line is as follows. It continues on. Shalom, then Hilkiah, Azariah, Sariah, and Jehozadak. So that gives us 24. It gives us a line of 24 there. So we learn that Jehozadak went into captivity with Jerusalem and Judah by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. So this provides us with the 24 descendants from Aaron to the time of the Babylonian captivity. Now, after the Babylonian exile, Zadok's family line of high priests continued until Jason, son of Simon II, and that was around 175 to 172 BC. And he was the last of the Zadokite dynasty, last of the Zadokites that were priests. So in 175 BC, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, or Antiochus Epiphanes IV, or just Antiochus Epiphanes, which many of you have probably heard of. He was a Hellenistic king, extremely evil. He was from the Seleucid Empire. He conquered Israel, and he deposed the rightful high priest Jason and appointed Menelaus as the new high priest. Antiochus outlawed Jewish religious rituals. He slaughtered a pig in order to desecrate the Jewish temple, and he ordered the Jews to worship Zeus as the supreme god instead of Yahweh. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus writes, quote, "Now Antiochus was not satisfied either with his unexpected taking of the city, Jerusalem, or with its pillage, or with the great slaughter he had made there. But being overcome with his violent passions and remembering what he had suffered during the siege, he compelled the Jews to dissolve the laws of their country and to keep their infants uncircumcised and to sacrifice swine's flesh upon the altar, against which they all opposed themselves, and the most approved among them were put to death." Now, according to the book of First Maccabees, Mattathias the Hasmonean began the revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes and the Seleucid Empire in 167 BC. He did this by refusing to worship the Greek gods, and he killed a Greek officer who was attempting to enforce a sacrifice to an idol, and he also killed a Jew who had stepped forward to do the sacrifice. So after this initial revolt, Mattathias and his five sons fled into the Judean wilderness. Now, after Mattathias died about a year later in 166 BC, one of his sons named Judas Maccabee led. Sometimes he's referred to as Judah Maccabee, but Judas, it's the same person we're talking about. Judas Maccabee led an army of Jews into many battles against the Seleucid rulers and any who sided with them in Israel. The Maccabees were victorious against the Seleucid Empire and were able to cleanse the temple, and that actually resulted in the creation of a new holiday in Israel, Hanukkah. And they were able to reestablish worship of Yahweh and Jewish rituals, and installed Judas's younger brother Jonathan Aphus, also called Jonathan the Hasmonean, as high priest. So he wore the garments of the high priest and officiated for the first time on the Feast of Tabernacles in 153 BC. Jonathan was the first priest in the Hasmonean dynasty. That's what they call it. Now, of course, it's generally understood as a good thing that the Jewish people were able to escape their persecution of their oppressors. However, it wasn't a perfect restoration, because for those who followed the books of the Old Testament, Jonathan Aphus should have never been made high priest because he was not a Zadokite. He was not one of the sons of Zadok. He didn't come from that line, so he never should have been made high priest. Now, history itself even seems to show that the Hasmonean dynasty was not blessed by God to take over the priesthood, as this was just the beginning of the increasing corruption in Israel's leadership until the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Now, that's not to say that God didn't bless the Jewish people being released from their captors, because clearly we have Hanukkah. We have a miracle that was done that God did. So they could cleanse the temple. So clearly God blessed at least that, but the priesthood itself, this was just the beginning of corruption that overtook Israel and led to what we see in the New Testament. So it seems that God did not bless the priesthood itself. So there's a clear distinction between those two things. Now, even more, the Hasmoneans had no ties to the Davidic line from which legitimate kings of Israel were supposed to descend. But they still took up kingship. So even in that regard, they never should have been priests or kings. Now, this actually leads to the origin of the Pharisees and Sadducees, and this leads further into our study of how we got to the times of the New Testament. We are going to have to do that in the members only section. So, again, you have no excuse. We are giving away a free trial, free 7-day trial. You can go to dailyrenegade.com. You can get this entire series when it becomes available. You always get early access to videos. So whenever you see things on YouTube by Daily Renegade, that full video has already been available on the website for a few days, probably, sometimes as many as a few weeks. So we always give our members early access, and you get the full episodes. So head on over to dailyrenegade.com, get a membership today. You can get a free trial. Once your trial is up, you can get it's $10 a month or $100 a year. Again, if you can do the $100 a year, do that. It's actually cheaper in the long run because you get 2 months for free. Just pay for it once. Don't think about it for a whole other year. It's a really good deal, and we would love to have your support. If you have been blessed by this ministry and what we do, please help support us and help us grow so we can reach even more people with all of this information, with the gospel, with the roots of our faith, with all of these things that can really help enrich the Christian life. So please help us do that, and we also want to reach the lost. We want to do lots of things through this ministry, and we sure could use your help. But in return for your help, we also like to provide you with services and products and things. So, I mean, there's even a free documentary up on Daily Renegade that's not available for free to everybody else that you can get. We're going to have a lot more stuff like that coming up. So go and be a member today, dailyrenegade.com, and we will see you over there. Members, hang on the line. We got a lot more to talk about, lots more interesting stuff having to do with the Pharisees, Sadducees, and the Qumran community, how they came to be. We have a lot more to get into. So members, hang on the line. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, love you all. Take care, and God bless.